Hi everybody, and welcome to our latest episode of Wellness and the Workplace. This week we are chatting to Paul Swift. Paul manages Flexible Workspace. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Liz. And thanks for inviting me. I work for Officers IQ, who are a boutique flexible workspace agency, which fundamentally we focus on helping corporate clients or enterprise clients create solutions that would adopt flexibility and efficiency into their real estate portfolio. That's the official tagline. I hope that's not too formal for you.
It sounds very good. It sounds perfect for the topic that we're going to talk about today. So,
hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously this last 12 months, we're currently in a pandemic, coming to the end of the pandemic. And what have you noticed with your clients during this time? And what does wellness in the workplace mean to you?
So we've kind of gone through three phases, or going through three phases since it happened in the UK, from 23rd of March, I think it was, so coming up to a year as we speak now, end of Feb. So the first part was hair on fire. What do we do? How do we cut costs? How do we stop our liabilities? And so there's a lot of helping people not automatically renew with their flexible workspace and kind of take advantage of lease events. That was the first part of support. Then it's gone into a long planning stage where people are trying to work out what does the future look like and for how far forward do we look. So initially it was what happened to the end of 2020 and what were the liabilities to reduce. Then it was what happens further forward, 18 months, 2 years down the line. And then to the back end of last year, 2020, and then for the first 4 or 5 weeks of this year, it's been about, okay, well, when we are able to move forward, these are the sorts of things we think we want to get to. And latterly, at the end of February, as we speak, it's now starting to become a bit more transactionally minded in the UK. We've been helping people globally, so the global bits have been slightly different and kept it and helped us keep things going. But it's starting to get a little bit busier. Certainly in the flexible world, it's the bottom of the market feels like it's been reached. Now we're on an uptick a little bit. From a wellness point of view, and part of that planning, a lot of clients have been trying to work out how do we get our staff back into the office? Do we and if they're back, what sort of state are they going to be in? So wellness in the workplace to me is kind of almost two parts. It's is aware of pressures and challenges that are placed on employees that are physical and mental, which is the organization's responsibility. The other side is actually going to a place of work and being productive that doesn't have any detrimental effects on your health. So that's the kind of what the wellness means to me, is from a personal point of view, and then from an organization's point of view.
Yeah. Do you think that businesses have done in the past, if we park the pandemic for like a moment, do you think they do enough to aid emotional, mental health and well-being in the office environment?
I think it's progressive, and I think it's been increasing slowly. I first started in this industry in 2003, so pretty long in the tooth. And at that point, it wasn't particularly sexy. Although the brand that I worked for at the time also owned Hotel Divan, Malmaison, and Liberty's department store. So we were quite edgy and quite attractive compared to the old style Regis and typical experience a lot of people still think is a serviced office. So that side, people wanted to go to work. So I guess that was from my experience, that well, if this is where you want to go and want to spend time, that's obviously a positive thing. So going back to my detrimental effects, that's a good thing. You then, as I got to know the industry, you got to see different types of workspace that was available, whether it be space per person, which has a detrimental or positive effect, or has amount of communal space it's going into, or the types of coffee or beer or wine that's served, or outside spaces. This is all kind of, the WeWork effect has been massive in that, is trying to attract people to an office that's something that people will spend more time. And I guess the likes of Twitter and Facebook and those sorts of San Francisco and Silicon Valley guys have really tried to make their workspaces attractive places to be, so that their staff would stay longer. Of course, they would work longer, but it was their choice to do that. So I think that's where businesses, I think they're slowly catching on that, or have caught on that this is it could be, we get more out of the employee if they like being at work. But there's probably going to be in the force of return to work, is it going to be a forced return to work, or in trying to compete with the home, for example, which is where all of us are working from?
Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of people about that recently, and the businesses need to really now think about what they're giving their employers to go back to. You know, they're probably going to downsize and, you know, all these things, but also they do have to the people have proved that they can work from home, so to get
to a certain degree,
well, not everybody. I'm sure there's people who have been skiving, but you know, businesses, they need the workforce to go back. It'll probably be in a different guys, you know, maybe they won't be there 8 till 5 anymore. They'll be there for meetings or collaboration and how the space will function. But you sort of like, feel like there needs to be a bit of a pull to get people to back into the space. I mean, not necessarily a beer after work, or, you know, we're going to provide you lunch. Like, it's a space where people actually want to be. Like, you know, you mentioned Facebook and Twitter and such. Like, I was talking to someone about Google the other day, and you walk into their office and it's design considered, everything about it. First of all, it represents the brand itself. So you walk in and you know the level of service you're going to get, the quality of service you're going to get. You've got that expectation, but also as an employer being there, you feel cared for, you know, and there's still a real gap in the office environment where you don't get that. You know, there's still offices with blue carpet and white walls and strip lighting, you know. So maybe this is an opportunity for those businesses to look at what they offer.
Yeah, I think it's the stick or carrot approach, isn't it, really? Is that, are you going to demand on the certain dates in the roadmap, whichever may be, that you must come into the office and this is what you must do?
Yeah.
That's one aspect to it. The other part is that we want to encourage you back. So I'm working with a client at the moment who is, we're looking at quite a healthy chunk of space. But the paramount conversation we're now having, which, I mean, we've been working with them for 10 months, and, you know, it's because of, you know, lockdowns, it's not been able to go through, but it's enabled them to speak to their staff at great length to see what is actually important. And a lot of the staff, because they're typically younger, want to have that cultural aspect. So we're now changing the design of the fabric of the office that we're talking about, and is the additional services, but also kind of an attitude of, if we've got to put extra soundproofing into the meeting rooms, for example, because there's going to be a lot more remote access to using Zoom calls like we're doing now.
Yeah.
But if you're doing a Zoom call and dialing into a meeting, you can't be considered a second-class citizen, which is I've certainly experienced in my time being in an echoey meeting room.
Yeah.
And you've dialed in because you've done your one day a week working from home to help with the school run and pick up. But you've got no involvement in what's going on.
Yeah.
So that's one part of it. It's another part of the well-being is trying to make sure that people are included and the culture is maintained. So that's one part. And the flip side is also, if people are told to be into the office, there's probably going to be very much a mental approach to traveling to the office. I've been into London now probably once a month, once every 2-3 months, and it's been delightful. I've thoroughly enjoyed it because I get a whole carriage to myself.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I can walk around London, and you look around and you can see.
It's like a Sunday morning, isn't it? Every day is like a Sunday morning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, when that changes and more people start to return, admittedly at different times of week and all that, we'll talk about that as well, because that's a big piece about wellness and the fabric of the buildings. Is that people are going to be nervous to come to an office and to spend time inside and to integrate and to be with people. I'm sure some people won't care, but the businesses have got to encourage it and make sure that the staff feel safe to come to the office, because the last thing they want is for someone to say, I don't want to go to the office, thanks, it's not safe, or there are no desks available, or is this, or I don't feel comfortable. Exactly. So there's a big responsibility piece, whether they like it or not, that they've got to. Also there's a lot of unemployment, more unemployment than before the pandemic hit. So, if people feel pressured to go to work because there's always somebody else that might take their job, it's a bit scarism, but that's people are available for work at the moment. So it's a very fine balance, and it's going to be very, very difficult, I'm sure, for everybody to work out what is right for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, there's been so many job cuts, and businesses have had to make dramatic cutbacks, and so many people have lost their jobs, and businesses have lost a fortune. There needs to be a way, there will be a way. There is a way to do things to improve the built environment, which is cost effective.
Very much so.
What they've got, I talk quite a lot to people about having these long rows of desks, which are sort of like very 90s, very 80s, very 2000, early 2000s. Let's look at making the spaces more collaborative and friendly. You go into an office space where there's like a room of 100 people with big long rows of desks. It's not got much curb appeal at all. When with some sensible space planning, you can change how the space feels, using the equipment of what they've already got. And I think that's something that businesses can do really, really easily.
Yeah, we've worked with a number of very large software firms actually that we're helping them enable their agile staff to, I think that they're looking to provide accessible workspace for 10,000 of their agile staff across 3 continents. Now that we're looking at using a mobile application to do that, which centralizes and gives them access to flexible workspace close to them, and also onboards their own floor plans. Because I think what's been overriding now is that this work from home experiment, has backed up a lot of the theory over the last previous few years, where to provide a desk for someone to sit down and do email is no longer needed. It may be not for that purpose.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, and you then have to change the function of that central meeting place.
Yeah.
And if using that app can help people book desks at certain times close to people they want to work with on a certain day,
that's amazing.
That's going to be very helpful to them. So that's been a very big point change, where the C-suite have been realised that actually we could repurpose the central unit and make some savings, because we've also had a drop in revenue or whatever it may be, so we need to, but also give people something that's beneficial to them to be able to work at home on a certain given rota or system, because that's the next bit, is which days of the week who works on when.
Absolutely. You don't need to have a desk for, I mean you probably know the answer to this, like how much a desk in London costs now. It's an obscene amount of money. And if you've got an office of 100 people, they're not all going to be in at once, and you don't need to give 100 people their own desk, so it's all about flexibility and how we can change spaces, how spaces can be used for one thing one day, and another day it's changed into, areas are changed into something else. And this idea where you say about, going into the office and doing your emails, absolutely not. Who needs to travel an hour as the average traveling time in London to go and sit somewhere and send emails for 6 hours? It's just, hopefully that won't happen to people. They can make those decisions now if they can do that remotely. And that's not to say they need to work from home. We've got a place near us in East Dulwich, and it's a catering company, events company, and they have a fantastic entertainment venue, and they're going to open that up to people to go and work collaboratively. So all you have to do is book your spot at the table. There's Wi-Fi, there's a power connection. You just got to buy your lunch, and you can be there all day. So how amazing is that? You could do that. You leave your house, you leave your bubble at home, because it's nice, to get out and go to a change of environment. But you don't actually have to go all the way into the city, and you can sort of support your immediate local economy.
Yep. I was speaking to a TV network about how they are changing their facilities and how they're changing their approach to their staff, where there's gone from going to a central point, as we've just been talking about, but also they're now working on a 15-minute rule. Okay. So everything that they need is within 15 minutes of their home. So it's their space to work from, their school, their shop, all their facilities, their utilities, everything is within 15 minutes from home. And that's what they've adopted. And that's a global TV network that's changed how they operate it.
That is all about, for me, I see that as about community. And it's sort of like, particularly in London, I mean, we actually fall from the same town. We grew up in the same town, didn't we? And it's that very much, it's a community very much everyone knows what everyone's doing sort of thing. But in London, it's sort of very fast paced. People don't talk to the neighbours, and they travel in for an hour into town and back, and they don't see the local high street. But by doing that 15-minute rule, you're going to put more money back into your local high street and back into your local economy. And that sense of community that used to be there in like the 50s, the 60s, whatever, will come back. And people, we've done it in our, since the pandemic, we've talked to our neighbours, we shop local more so than ever. So that's amazing that they've done that. I've never heard that.
Just on that shopping, isn't it funny how probably 18 months ago we were really worried about the high street dying, and it seems that certainly where I'm in Ealing in West London, my mini high street is I wouldn't say it's thriving, but it's certainly there are new shops opening, and there aren't any empty shops now. I appreciate where I'm, it was quite fortunate. But if people are keeping to the 15-minute rule or using their local infrastructure more, then that would obviously give the purpose of the local high street more sense of community, as you mentioned. That detrimental effect, of course, is the central London part, where we know that lots of people in central London are really struggling or in central cities, I should say, because they're struggling because the workers aren't in the big tall office blocks. So there's that give and take and that balance, of course. But I'm sure it's about making things an experience, I guess.
But the flexible working is interesting. Looking at the high street. I mean, I did 9 years in retail design, and the high street, the retail design has slowed down a lot, because the nature of people's shopping habits have changed. Everyone's gone to this online world, even more so this last year, and there are a lot of empty units on the retail units on the high street. Why can't these be turned into flexible working spaces?
Well, that is a movement that's starting. I know two. Yeah, I know two entities that are looking at doing exactly that. And so you've got lots of shop from floor. It's just a professional coffee shop, effectively, because the coffee shop is there to be social ultimately. And if you want to send a few emails or plug in, then that's great. But if you want to be productive, it's probably not the most productive place to be. So getting a shop front area, which effectively gives you a little workspace that you can, from an operational point of view, double or triple sell to a certain degree, assuming it's cleaned appropriately, of course, but it's close to home, then that would be a really good use of empty retail units.
There can be printing facilities, there can be internet, anything they need.
Call rooms, go-to rooms, video rooms, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And I'm a big advocate of working mums and self-employed mums. And obviously, because I can relate, and I've had the struggles of having a baby and being self-employed, and this idea of being able to collaborate somewhere locally with women in my same situation, how amazing would that be, that you can do it on your local high street? It
makes a lot of sense in hindsight. It's just who's tested the model, who's going to use it and access it. There are some people, but will enough people use it? That's the difference. So we'll see. But that is certainly a movement going forward.
But yeah, absolutely. Maybe that's something that potentially could happen. It's quite exciting. I feel like the pandemic, I always try and look for the positive, and if there's change that can happen because of the pandemic, we're actually going to embark on a new era of change, and sort of getting people back, really. Do your clients, are they talking to you now about changes that they're looking to make after the return? How does that sit?
Yeah, so I guess there are a couple of aspects that are overriding. People want to. It's how do we get our staff back to work? How do we reduce our liability? And how can we save money flat on everything? So there's obviously to a certain degree a bit of a buyer's market attitude, which is understandable and quite right. The transactions have been so low over the last 12 months or so that if you're looking for office space now, then you're in a very good position. So you should be able to get some quite attractive rates compared to speaking to pre-pandemic times. But what's also happening is in my flexible workspace world is that a lot of people who are in longer term liabilities, so big in leases, are taking less space more flexibly, so coming into my world. So it's almost like the demand has started to increase exponentially. So it's a very busy and interesting time where people are looking to reduce costs, take less space, but still have but also have a very desirable place for their staff to work. And a lot of the time that the flexible workspace market can provide that off the shelf, or a turnkey. What will happen the next probably 2 years is there's also a lot of what's called grey space coming onto the market. A lot of it's come already, but there's a lot more to come, where it's people who have relinquished leases, want to downsize their space and get rid of sublet. Got 2, 3, 4 years left on their leases, and they want to get rid of it. Typically, that's not always the best space that they've got. So there's a lot of space in the market. It's not a lot of great quality. There are some good bits, don't get me wrong. So over the next 2 years is how that sort of space is repurposed to make it attractive and desirable, is what's going to be a really interesting point, particularly for the likes of your industry and the fit out world.
Yeah, absolutely. And what can you do in your role now that can really help people and to promote this wellness in the built environment?
So I think predominantly it's about choice and talking to clients about what their choices are, because whilst they may have a tactical reason for speaking to me, as in save costs, reduce liability, all these sort of things I just spoke about, actually they don't know how to go about it or to navigate it. So I was on a webinar, and a very large pharmaceutical company, their global head of real estate, said all the parts of the property world and the real estate world are there. I just don't know how to access them, which was obviously music to my ears, because that's what I do and I help clients do that. But by doing that is challenging their status quo, finding out what they want to get from the so that the means come to the end, by providing choice, by helping define that brief. And then when we understand what the client's looking to get out of it, and the fiscal and emotional elements, or the environment elements, we can then go shopping. And it could be adopting a hub and spoke model, which is kind of now becoming quite a well-known term, but I'm not sure if that's strictly going to be as good as all the answer, because if you're going to take away from centralized units, you've got increased costs to run multiple sites, so that may or may not be appropriate. But the app that I mentioned earlier, or that we actually use about 3 or 4 apps, and depending on what the client wants, that's a really big way of helping clients navigate. I think it's space really on an interim solution. And it helps also drive the locations of where locations could be in the future, so it gives them a real good stopgap and gives some information. No,
that's brilliant. I could talk to you all day, Paul. It's an absolute fascinating world, and I just think we've got some really exciting and probably challenging times ahead. But now's a really good time to make change, I suppose.
Absolutely. Thanks for your time. Appreciate you inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll chat again soon. Before we go, if people want to talk to you about FlexSpace, sure, tell us how we get in touch with you.
So the website's officesiq.com, quite simply. Look me up on LinkedIn, and pretty easy to find, or obviously through yourself.
Brilliant. I'll put all the details in the notes. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye for now. Thank you for watching. Bye.
You over there?